Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. The cultivators of the 4 divisions of the river-defying sect would never be able to forget the unbelievable event they were witnessing. It was now burned down into their minds, into their very souls, and would be there for all eternity. As the hand settled onto the surface of the ground, the rest of the arm shot out from beneath the surface of the water. The river surged with powerful waves that sent even the profound Stream Division's 210,000-meter heavenspan battleship rocking back and forth. As for the Pill Stream Division's battleship, the Patriarchs had to intervene to keep it stable. The minds of all onlookers were left blank as they stared at the enormous arm sticking up out of the heavenspan river. Amidst the silence which prevailed, the 2 beams of light continued to shoot up into the sky. Intense rumbling sounds were accompanied by flashes of multicolored light, as well as a powerful wind. Then, everyone could sense an indescribably powerful energy radiating out as the hand shoved down. Something like an island appeared in the middle of the heavenspan river, which was actually a head that slowly rose up from the surface of the water. By now, even the 300,000-meter-long heavenspan battleship was affected by the surging waves. All 3 of the huge battleships were being pushed away down the river, causing gasps to ring out among the onlookers. Even Gongsun Wanner's eyes were wide, and an extremely rare expression of shock could be seen on her face. Slowly, the head rose up, revealing 2 eyes that would leave anyone who saw them completely shaken to the core. Next, a nose became visible, and then the lips. Finally, a roar shot out from the mouth, a roar which could shake the heavens. The sounds filling heaven and earth exceeded thunder. The Blood Ancestor's hand continued to push down as, next, his neck was revealed. Before anyone could even react, the heavenspan river virtually exploded, sending 300-meter-tall waves rolling out as another hand stretched out from the water and planted itself onto the opposite bank. The ground quaked as crevices opened up and portions of the land completely collapsed. Beneath the hand of the Blood Ancestor, the seemingly rock-hard earth became as soft as putty. Now that both hands were firmly planted, everything was cast into shadow as an unforgettably enormous figure slowly rose to a standing position above the heavenspan river. The head, the neck, the shoulders, and the chest rose up to an unimaginable height. 300 meters, 3,000 meters, 30,000 meters. Soon, the portion of the Blood Ancestor which rose up above the river reached a height of tens upon tens of thousands of meters. His broad shoulders were almost as wide as the heavenspan river itself. Every scrap of muscle on his body radiated terrifying pressure, and his waist was so narrow that it almost formed a triangle with his shoulders. Although everything beneath his waist was below the surface of the river, anyone who possessed the ability to do so would be able to see that the Blood Ancestor's feet were already planted on the river bottom. To cultivators, the heavenspan river was profoundly deep, but to the Blood Ancestor, that was not the case. Although it was the Blood Ancestor who was standing up, Bai Xiaochun was now the Blood Ancestor's soul, and its entire body was under his control. As he looked out of the Blood Ancestor's eyes, heaven and earth seemed much smaller. To him, the mountains were nothing more than playthings, and the mighty river below him was like a stream. The mightiest of trees were like grass, and the cultivators were like tiny ants. The feeling was difficult to describe. As he lifted his gaze, he felt as if he could reach up and pluck the heavenly bodies out of the sky. His heart swelled, and after a moment, he couldn't help but throw his head back and let loose a long cry. That cry shook the highest heavens and filled the entire continent. Birds and beasts trembled in terror, and the waters of the heavenspan river surged. The huge golden crocodile which lay beneath its surface looked up, and even it appeared to be shaken. There were other enormous beasts who were similarly terrified, and left shaking. Blood Ancestor, murmured founding patriarch Frigid Sect. His scalp was tingling, and he was shaking visibly. Next to him, Li Zimo, Patriarch Ironwood, and the other patriarchs were similarly ashen-faced and incredulous. I can't believe it actually moved. Now that is how to make an impression. The Bloodstream Division is going to use the body of the Blood Ancestor to move upriver. Patriarch Crimson Soul was struck speechless, and the other nascent Soul Taoist masters from the Profound Stream Division were all completely taken aback. It was even more the case with the Pill Stream Division. All eyes were focused on that towering figure which blotted out even the sun. If even the patriarchs were reacting in such a way, there was little need to mention the Gold Core and Foundation Establishment experts. All cultivators from all 4 divisions were shaken and excited. Of course, most excited of all were the cultivators from the Bloodstream Division. All of them dropped to their knees to kowtow to the Blood Ancestor, calling out at the tops of their lungs. Greetings, blood ancestor. Greetings, blood ancestor. The words echoed out throughout the lands in shocking fashion. Meanwhile, aboard the Spirit Stream Division's Heavenspan battleship, Gongsun Wanner was looking at the blood ancestor with a strange expression on her face. She seemed confused, and was frowning. Apparently, she was trying to recall something, but was having trouble doing so. Then she saw the blood ancestor's eyes, and she felt as if she were looking at Bai Xiaochun's eyes. At that point, a mysterious light rose up in her own gaze. There was another woman who had a very strange expression on her face, an expression of both reverence and fear, as well as a level of incredulity that surpassed virtually everyone else present. That young woman was in the Pillstream Division. She was so beautiful as to cause almost any male to lose control around her. Chen Manyao. There was another shadowy figure that no one else detected, not even Bai Xiaochun. In the moment that he took full control of the blood ancestor, that figure appeared high up in the sky. He wore a long black robe, and it was impossible to make out his facial features. However, he was clearly very old, and was permeated with an aura of death. He was looking at the blood ancestor with mixed emotions, including reminiscence. If Bai Xiaochun had been able to see him, he would have recognized him immediately. That old man was the same man he had run into in the Nameless Mountains, the person who had saved his life. The Gravekeeper. After a moment, the Gravekeeper sighed, and then vanished without a trace. As the blood ancestor rose to his feet, massive amounts of Heavenspan River water flowed off of him, pouring down like rain toward the surface of the earth. The patriarchs gasped and immediately drove the water away from the cultivators of their various divisions. After all, that water was so powerful it could instantly melt many of the weaker cultivators upon contact. Bai Xiaochun looked back down at the area around him. He was still not quite used to the new sensations he was feeling. However, after seeing that his disturbance of the Heavenspan River water hadn't hurt anyone, he breathed a sigh of relief. As of this moment, he realized that his own body was actively benefiting from having seized control of the blood ancestor, and was slowly growing more powerful. His Asura body was improving. It's too bad the blood ancestor is dead. I can control his body, but can't unleash the true power he was capable of in life. Even the fleshly body power I can unleash is only a small portion of his true potential. After taking some more time to analyze his connection to the blood ancestor, he had a better idea of the situation. Even the small portion of power he controlled was enough that a single fist strike on his part was more than a nascent soul patriarch could withstand. After a bit more contemplation, he sensed the thoughts and fluctuations of the other Bloodstream Division cultivators inside the blood ancestor. He could even sense the divine sense of Arch-Patriarch Master Godwind. With that, he stretched out the hand that had once been the headquarters of the Bloodstream sect, and placed it back down onto the ground. When he spoke, his voice caused all the lands to shake. Bloodstream Division, to me. The excited Bloodstream Division disciples excitedly flew forward toward the opening in the hand. After they were all safely inside of the blood ancestor, Bai Xiaochun lifted the hand back up, and then pointed up the river. Army of the river-defying sect, let us begin our march. As his thunderous voice boomed, Bai Xiaochun sent one of the blood ancestor's legs forward, and he began to walk up the river. Spirit Stream Division founding patriarch Frigid Sect took a deep breath and then waved his hand, sending the Spirit Stream Division into action. The 300,000-meter Heavenspan battleship erupted with shocking power as it began to slice through the water after the blood ancestor. The Profound Stream Division and the Pill Stream Division similarly sent their battleships into motion. Soon, they were all following along, traveling up the Heavenspan River toward the middle reaches. The sun was beginning to set. A huge giant was in the lead, followed by 3 enormous battleships. As they proceeded up the river, the heavens shook and the lands quaked. It was a majestic sight. All beasts who inhabited the Heavenspan River were completely incapable of hindering their path, and did nothing but flee from them. The Heavenspan Sea occupied the very center of the world. It was a vast, boundless body of golden water that not even nascent soul cultivators would dare to enter without some sort of magical device designed for sea travel. Only people in the Diva realm could possibly make an attempt at crossing the sea, and with difficulty at that. In the east, west, south and north regions of the Heavenspan Sea, there were places where the seawater poured through openings that created 4 enormous rivers. Although those rivers didn't reach the very borders of the world, they did come close. Each of the 4 great rivers had a river source sect at the base of the river, in the location where the sea and the river met. The sect which controlled the eastern river was the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. After the river flowed for a certain distance, it split up into 4 smaller branches of the same river. The locations where those 4 rivers branched off came to be known as the middle reaches of the cultivation world. Those locations were home to the Starry River Court, the Sky River Court, the Tao River Court, and the Polarity River Court. Those 4 sects were deserving of the domineering reputation they maintained in the eastern middle reaches of the cultivation world. Any one of them was powerful enough to completely dominate the other smaller sects in the region, as well as the vast number of cultivator clans. Although each river branch that formed the lower reaches was occupied by 4 powerful sects, even if those sects combined forces, they wouldn't be a match for one of the larger sects that occupied the middle reaches. However, there was only one reason for that. The patriarchs of the lower reaches sects were all nascent soul cultivators, whereas the patriarchs of the middle reaches sects were in the Diva realm. The Diva realm was something completely different from the nascent soul stage. It was an almost unimaginable level of power, and the difference between it and nascent soul was even greater than the difference between nascent soul and gold core. It was almost impossible to even fathom the disparity. Because of the threat of such power, none of the sects in the lower reaches would ever dream of trying to topple a middle reaches sect, not unless some heaven-defying event occurred. Furthermore, the chances of one of the nascent soul cultivators from the lower reaches breaking through to become a diva were minuscule. Even people who overflowed with latent talent would be hard-pressed to find an opportunity to do so. The reason for that was because in the lower reaches, the spiritual power of the Heavenspan River was different, the resources were different, and the techniques were different. An even bigger reason was that diva tribulation was virtually impossible to transcend without a Dharma protector. However, the biggest reason was that the middle reaches sects would never let one of their subordinates in the lower reaches produce a diva. That would be a threat to their own positions. However, none of that applied in this situation. An exceedingly rare opportunity had arisen with the Sky River Court. For some unknown reason, the Sky River Court had done something to enrage the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect. As a result, 2 devas had been sent to execute judgment on the Sky River Court's Diva Realm Patriarch. Supposedly, they had even extracted part of his soul to create something that was rarely ever seen in the world, and very valuable, a diva soul. In addition to that, more than 70% of the Sky River Court cultivators had been put to death, and that included portions of the reserve powers and precious treasures. If they had wanted to, they could have simply exterminated the entire Sky River Court. Instead, they had issued an important ruling allowing it to stay in place. By allowing the Sky River Court to survive, they had created the spark which led to the war among the 4 subordinate sects in the lower reaches. By leaving the severely weakened Sky River Court in place, they provided an enticing goal for the lower reaches sects. Of course, the Sky River Court wouldn't just sit around waiting to be supplanted. If they could survive the assault of the lower reaches sects, then according to the stipulations of the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect, they would have a chance to continue to exist. If they managed to raise another of their cultivators to the Diva realm in the future, then they might be able to return to their previous level of glory. It wasn't that they weren't aware that the 4 sects had ended up joining forces. They did know, and yet, didn't dare to interfere. According to the rules set forth by the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect, they weren't allowed to meddle with the affairs of the lower reaches sects. They had no choice but to sit still and await the final punishment which had been arranged by the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect. That punishment was none other than the invasion of the lower reaches sects. The sect headquarters of the Sky River Court was built atop the Heavenspan River itself. It was 10 times larger than any sect in the lower reaches. After all, it was almost impossible to see one side of the river from the other in this area. Much further down the river from that location was where it split into 4 more branches, which was the lower reaches of the cultivation world. On the first of those 4 branches, it was possible to see an enormous giant plodding along, half submerged in the river water. Every step the giant took sent water surging and spraying about, and the countless vicious spirits and other vile creatures nearby fleeing for their lives. Even the most powerful of entities which lived in the river would choose to hide in the face of the power they felt, and would simply allow the giant to pass by. Occasionally, it was possible to see a rabbit flitting about on the shoulders of the giant. Some distance behind the giant was a 300,000-meter-long Heavenspan battleship, slicing through the water. Countless cultivators could be seen on the battleship, most of them seated cross-legged in meditation as they attempted to get themselves into peak readiness for the fighting to come. A somber and solemn aura surrounded the entire battleship. 2 more battleships could be seen further back in the river, one of them 210,000 meters long, the other 90,000 meters. They seemed just as solemn as the first battleship. Bai Xiaochun had converged the consciousnesses of numerous powerful cultivators to take control of the blood ancestor. His eyes shone with bright light as he strode through the river water. He could sense the vastness of the world around him, and to him, the water bashing against him felt soft and gentle. He couldn't help but feel a grand sense of wonderment. One day, I won't need to use the body of the blood ancestor to get this exact same feeling. With that, he took another step forward, moving thousands of meters in the process. Based on the speed of the blood ancestor and the heavenspan battleships, it only took a few days for them to pass unobstructed through the river until they reached the spot where it connected to the larger river upstream. Stretching out to the horizon was a massive river that only the patriarchs had ever seen during their formal visits to the Sky River Court every 60-year cycle. For the other cultivators, it was their first time ever seeing a river this big. It was 10 times wider than the Heavenspan River they were used to. The middle reaches Heavenspan River. Is this the Heavenspan River? It's so huge. Compared to this river, ours really is nothing more than a stream. The cultivators of the 3 divisions on the Heavenspan battleships could immediately sense that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here was 10 times stronger than that which existed in the lower reaches. Many people took in deep breaths, whereupon cracking sounds could be heard coming from inside of them. They had never encountered spiritual energy this strong, and for many, it immediately allowed them to break through cultivation obstacles that had hindered them in the past. This is the middle reaches. My cultivation base. The only way to take over the Sky River Court is to defeat them in battle. If I continue to cultivate here, I'll definitely be able to reach the level of a nascent soul patriarch. Even the patriarchs of the river-defying sect were panting in excitement. In fact, their feelings ran even deeper than the other cultivators because they were finally closing in on their ultimate goal, becoming devas. If they could put down roots in the middle reaches, the resources and spiritual power there would make the diva realm more than just a distant dream. Furthermore, no one from above would come to interfere as they reached the breakthrough point. After all, having a diva realm expert was one of the main requirements for middle reaches sects. Bai Xiaochun could sense the excitement of the patriarchs. As he controlled the body of the blood ancestor, he took a deep breath, and everything in heaven and earth shook. A massive surge of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth raced toward him, as he became like a black hole. After the spiritual energy entered the body of the blood ancestor, he sent it out to the cultivators of the bloodstream division, and then took a bit for himself. His 9th spiritual sea had previously been just on the verge of crystallizing. As of this moment, it only took that single breath to finish the process. The instant it fully crystallized, Bai Xiaochun trembled as his cultivation base erupted with power vastly greater than before. After 9 spiritual seas fully crystallized, that was the Great Circle of Heaven Dao Foundation establishment. The middle reaches, he thought, brimming with excitement. All of a sudden, he felt as if he were connected by destiny to the middle reaches. If not, why else would he have made a breakthrough the instant he entered? Despite being inside of the blood ancestor, he was still able to suck in spiritual energy without any wastage. It seemed boundless. Eyes flickering, he sent the blood ancestor leaping forward. Massive rumbling could be heard as the blood ancestor flew through the air and then splashed down into the river that was the eastern heavenspan. Rumble. Water splashed everywhere, and huge waves rolled out. It was in that moment that the 3 heavenspan battleships also burst out into the middle reaches. Bai Xiaochun felt truly free and unrestricted as he sent the blood ancestor up into the middle reaches. By this point, he could control the body of the blood ancestor with complete agility and dexterity. The river began to get deeper, and soon it was up to the chest of the blood ancestor. As for the 3 heavenspan battleships, because of the abundance of spiritual energy, they were able to move more quickly, making it easier for them to keep up with the giant. Rumbling echoed out from the heavenspan river as the group proceeded on upstream. It was at this point that the patriarchs of the 3 divisions issued orders, and the enormous sails of the battleships were unfurled. Upon each sail could be seen 3 shining, golden characters. River-defying sect. This was the first time that the name of the river-defying sect had been announced in the middle reaches of the cultivation world. As the wind caused the sails to flap, the words looked particularly impressive. The patriarchs of all 4 divisions had agreed to do this ahead of time. Back then, the Arch-Patriarch Master Godwind hadn't been completely sure that the plan with the blood ancestor would work. Therefore, the plan was to use the 3 heavenspan battleships, not just to transport the members of the sect, but also to impress and awe those who saw them. It was an attempt to threaten anyone who harbored thoughts of trying to carve out their own spheres of power in the territory currently controlled by the Sky River Court. Clearly, this method was working. The cultivation world of the middle reaches was far larger in area than the lower reaches. Considering that all of the lower reaches was simply one part of the territory controlled by the dominant middle reaches sect, it was possible to imagine how large of an area that was. Occasionally, smaller sects and cultivator clans were visible on the shores of the river. Clearly, such organizations had unique relationships with the Sky River Court to be permitted to establish themselves so close to the river itself. Normally, they were a proud and arrogant lot, comfortable in their respected position within the middle reaches. As for the lower reaches, they looked down on them with disdain. But now that the Sky River Court was being punished, such organizations were getting more and more nervous. Then they saw the 3 Heavenspan battleships, and their eyes went wide. They were struck with fear and awe, and could scarcely believe what they were seeing. And that was without even mentioning the enormous giant that led the way for the battleships. They're the river-defying sect? They come from the lower reaches. They're going to attack the Sky River Court in the hopes of replacing it. The cultivator clans and small-scale sects were all trembling in nervousness, completely shaken by what they were seeing. Once the battleships and the giant made their way off into the distance, the cultivator clans and small-scale sects immediately sent word to others that they knew in the middle reaches. Before long, everyone was shaken, and even the courts on the other rivers became aware of what was happening. Of the other sects and clans in the territory of the Sky River Court, some were terrified and some were nervous. However, there were some who merely narrowed their bloodshot eyes, as if they were trying to decide what to do. However, other groups which had never been treated very well, especially groups more on the borders of the Sky River Court territory, quickly made up their minds. This is an opportunity for the river-defying sect, but it's also an opportunity for our Joshi clan. We can show up in the river-defying sect's moment of greatest need. If we join them in attacking the Sky River Court, the merit we earn in battle will be a protection for our clan. It will buy us at least 1,000 years of stability. Let's risk it. If we don't attack now, the heavens only know when we might get another chance. Before long, the entire Sky River Court territory was in a huge commotion as numerous organizations began to head in the direction of the Sky River Court's headquarters. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun's progress up the Heavenspan River had slowed some. This was a decision made by the patriarchs of the 4 divisions. As far as they were concerned, it wouldn't make any difference if they arrived at the Sky River Court a day earlier or a day later. Besides, they wanted to wait for news of the river-defying sect to spread in the area. That way, any sects or clans who wished to join them would have time to make their decision. Furthermore, any who were on the fence would have a chance to make their way to the area near the Sky River Court to observe how things played out. By waiting until the right moment to strike at the Sky River Court, they would be able to maximize the benefits of winning. When Bai Xiaochun heard their plan, he couldn't help but sigh. Clearly, the patriarchs were making a gamble. However, he knew that all of them were profound at scheming and planning, and were the slyest of sly foxes. When they all got together to plan, they would hash things out to the finest detail. At one point, the patriarchs of the other 3 divisions gathered on the shoulders of the Blood Ancestor. As they sat there cross-legged, Master Godwind materialized in illusory form on the Blood Ancestor's ear to confer with them. Our attack on the Sky River Court will encompass 3 major offensives. Restrictive spells were cast to ensure that no one would eavesdrop. As for Bai Xiaochun, he looked askance at the ant-like forms on his shoulders, and couldn't help but feel a bit annoyed. The first offensive will be via the water. This assault must be lightning swift, and we must achieve victory as soon as possible. Only in that way can we impress the cultivator clans and the other sects, and give them the confidence to join us. That's right. The second offensive will be through the jungle. The Sky River Court is enormous, and is surrounded by jungle on either side. The fighting will be bitter, and the main goal will be to reach the Sky River Court headquarters. Heh. So what you're saying is that the third offensive will be on the sect headquarters itself? Yes, but the most difficult part of the final offensive won't be dealing with the cultivators of the Sky River Court. It will be the dire Skybanyan, which feeds on the flesh and blood of 1 million cultivators every 100 years. The Sky River Court's Diva Patriarch might have perished, but according to our intelligence reports, their dire Skybanyan is still very much alive. Furthermore, its power is similar to that of a diva. As the patriarchs discussed their plans, Bai Xiaochun listened in, heart-pounding with shock. When he heard them mention the dire Skybanyan, he couldn't help but be intrigued. Time passed. Half a month later, the first of the cultivator clans presented themselves to the river-defying sect on the bank of the river, and declared their allegiance. They would join the river-defying sect in attacking the Sky River Court. These organizations who didn't feel the need to wait and see how the fighting went before joining were taken very seriously by the river-defying sect. Although they weren't invited to board the battleships, they were promised many benefits in the future. In the following days, more organizations appeared to offer allegiance. Another half a month passed, and by that time, 30 cultivator clans and 5 small-scale sects had joined the alliance with the river-defying sect. As they got closer to the Sky River Court, this trend influenced many of the other organizations, and became a major factor in their own decisions. By this point, the river-defying sect felt that they were ready. With that, they pushed forward at full speed. Rumbling could be heard as the Blood Ancestor flew through the Heavenspan River, slicing through the water, followed by the 3 Heavenspan battleships. A few days later, the members of the river-defying sect finally caught sight of something astonishing up ahead on the river. It was a gigantic tree that reached high up into the sky, and actually connected both banks of the river. It was an enormous banyan tree that was called a sky banyan. The tree had lived for many, many years, and was tens of thousands of meters tall. Its roots were buried into both banks of the river, with rootlets dangling down to brush the surface of the water below. Many of the rootlets had grown together in clumps, creating walkways for people to tread upon. The entire sight was completely shocking. The roots which sank into the banks of the river actually formed countless smaller sky banyans, almost like children to the mother that was the enormous larger tree. Because they were all connected together, they were like a huge jungle. That jungle fairly radiated an aura of blood and gore. It was like an enormous graveyard, something which was nurtured by the power of flesh and blood. That was because sky banyans were trees that loved to feast on skin and gore. Although the patriarchs of the river-defying sect had already spread word about the sky banyans, when the members of the sect saw them with their own eyes, they couldn't help but be shaken mentally. The main tree radiated an aura of death, and many of its branches and limbs were withered, as were many of the smaller trees in the disorganized jungle which surrounded it. Even more astonishing was that in the middle of the trunk of the main tree, an enormous handprint could be seen, as if a palm strike had been delivered with the intention of destroying it. Clearly, the dire sky banyan, despite not being dead, was panting on the verge of passing away. Even still, the scant bit of power that it still retained was enough to threaten everything in the area. The Sky River Court was a place that abounded with a sinister air. Currently, not a single cultivator was visible in the area, and yet it was possible to detect glares of hatred falling upon the river-defying sect from within the sky banyans. Most of those gazes were leveled on Bai Xiaochun and the Blood Ancestor. In the moment that the Blood Ancestor and the 3 Heavenspan battleships appeared in front of the headquarters of the Sky River Court, the entire Heavenspan River seemed to go quiet. At first no one from either side said a thing. They only looked at each other, gazes burning with killing intent. Whether it was the Sky River Court or the river-defying sect, neither could be considered in the right or in the wrong. As the silence wore on, an intense pressure built up until the air itself seemed to solidify. At the same time, numerous organizations that existed within the territory of the Sky River Court were all watching to see what would happen. After a long moment, an illusory version of the Bloodstream Archpatriarch appeared out in the open. Facing the Sky River Court, he clasped hands and bowed deeply. I, Master Godwind, offer greetings to the presiding sect. Next, the Spirit Stream founding patriarch appeared in person. Bowing, he said, I, Frigid Sect, offer greetings to the presiding sect. After him were the strongest patriarchs from the Profound and Pill Stream divisions. Their expressions were wistful as they clasped hands and offered formal greetings. I, Crimson Soul, offer greetings to the presiding sect. I, Sivpil, offer greetings to the presiding sect. At first, the Sky River Court maintained silence. Of the countless gazes emanating from the dire sky banyan, many were filled with mixed emotions. After a long moment passed, a hoarse voice echoed out. Master Godwind, Frigid Sect, Crimson Soul, Sivpil. It's been a long time, fellow Taoists. As the voice filled the air, an old man emerged from the Sky River Court, hovering tall and straight. He had long white hair, and a malicious air to him. Especially terrifying was the fact that, on the left side of his face, he had a huge growth of flesh the size of an infant's head. 8 people appeared along with him, just behind him. Shockingly, each one was a nascent soul cultivator. The strongest of them all was the old man, who was clearly in the Great Circle, and even had a bit of a Heaven Dao aura to him. Given enough time, that old man would most likely be able to reach the Diva realm. The old man flashed a bitter smile. Eyes filled with profound ancientness, he said, this fight doesn't need a lengthy preamble. I know that you have come to offer greetings today because of the judgment set forth by the presiding sect. There is no right or wrong here today, at least, not that exists between our 2 sects. However, there is one thing that I'm certain of. And that is, as the man spoke, mixed emotions could be seen on his face. His voice grew softer and softer, until Master Godwind and the other patriarchs were straining to hear what he said. However, in that very moment, a crimson eyeball suddenly opened on the tumor on the side of his face, and it radiated venomous hatred and madness. Then the old man shouted, "You people will all die here today." Even as the words left his mouth, the air around the 3 heaven-span battleships began to twist and distort as tens of thousands of people materialized. All sorts of cultivation bases were present. However, each and every person was extremely fast, and was adept at using spatial manipulation magic. In the blink of an eye, they were already attacking the battleships. Even more such figures appeared in the vicinity of the patriarchs, and those figures' murderous auras were especially intense. Clearly, the Sky River Court was attempting to take advantage of the river-defying sect's moment of unpreparedness to launch a sneak attack, and hopefully, seize the upper hand. However, in the very moment that the Sky River Court's cultivators attacked, rumbling echoed out as an enormous sword materialized. Almost as soon as it appeared, it divided into tens of thousands of smaller great swords which slashed through the air toward the dire Skybanyan. This was the profound stream division sword formation, which normally took a significant amount of time to prepare. The fact that it had suddenly appeared right here and now indicated that the 4 patriarchs' politeness earlier had just been for show. This was a situation of fighting viciousness with ferocity. This was a war that would determine the fate of 2 sects, and there was no room for righteousness or morality. Any such weakness would come at a bitter price. Rumbling booms filled the air as shields of light sprang up around the heavenspan battleships, completely blocking the attacks of the Sky River Court cultivators and preventing them from advancing toward the ships. Simultaneously, blood-colored light erupted from the Blood Ancestor, protecting the patriarchs. In the direction of the Sky River Court, the dire Skybanyan began to glitter with light, and then countless leaves flew out to block the sword formation. The mutual sneak attacks launched by both sides had failed to secure the upper hand for either one of them. Neither sect was showing any consideration for the other, nor was anyone interested in having a discussion. The fighting had begun. Countless vine-like branches shot out from the Skybanyan like vicious, bloodthirsty snakes. Accompanying them were numerous cultivators, almost blurs as they shot through the air toward the river-defying sect. The Sky River Court cultivators were skilled with spatial manipulation magic, and were far faster than ordinary cultivators. Furthermore, they were very skilled at concealing themselves. The truth was that in the middle reaches of the cultivation world, the Sky River Court was known for being able to kill anyone, anywhere. It was even correct to say that the Sky River Court was a sect of assassins. In the blink of an eye, more than 10,000 Sky River Court cultivators appeared, blotting out the sky as they unleashed deadly attacks. They flitted through the air as if they were performing teleportations. Almost as soon as they became visible, they would vanish to another spot. This was the first time that the river-defying sect was facing such techniques, and that gave the Sky River Court a clear advantage. Then there were the vines, which brimmed with astonishing strength as they screamed through the air. At the same time, numerous smaller skybanyans on the 2 banks of the river emerged from the ground and transformed into tree ants. Howling, they launched themselves out over the Heavenspan River toward the river-defying sect. Some of the tree ants were dozens of meters tall, some of them were hundreds of meters tall. In each and every one of them, Sky River Court cultivators could be seen, sitting there meditating as they unleashed power to control the tree ants' shocking strength. Even as the Sky River Court forces charged forth, Bai Xiaochun sent the Blood Ancestor leaping up into the air. As a result, massive waves rolled out across the surface of the Heavenspan River water. Many of the Sky River Court cultivators were simply impeded by the waves, but others who didn't evade them quickly enough screamed miserably as they were inundated and then melted by the water. How could the Sky River Court possibly ignore the fact that the Blood Ancestor had just leapt up into the air? The truth was that the Blood Ancestor was actually the focal point of this fight. Instantly, countless vines shot out from the numerous skybanyans, which flew through the air and began to wrap around the Blood Ancestor. Those vines emanated shocking strength, and were backed by the will of the dire Skybanyan itself. Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered with cold light. Without the slightest hesitation, he unleashed all of his blood chi, viciously waving his right hand and snapping all of the vines. Bai Xiaochun was well aware that his mission in this battle was to neutralize the dire Skybanyan. As he proceeded forward toward the enormous tree, more and more vines snaked out, speeding toward him with wild abandon as they attempted to impede his progress. At the same time, the 300,000-meter-long Heavenspan battleship shot forward, glittering with the light of spell formations as countless giants rose up on its deck. Roaring, the giants leapt out to fight with the Sky River Court cultivators. A similar thing occurred with the second battleship. A vast host of puppets flew out, smashing into the forces of the Sky River Court. More sword formations appeared up in the sky, and then a rain of swords began to fall. Then came the Pillstream Division. An enormous cauldron materialized up in the air, which began to bathe everything in the area with soft light. There was something toxic about the light, and any Sky River Court cultivator who it touched began to shake violently. In contrast, the river-defying sect cultivators who the light touched felt their cultivation bases rising and their wounds being healed. Chen Manyao's voice rang out as she gave orders to the Pillstream Division, and toxic gas immediately began to spread toward the enemy. In the blink of an eye, massive rumbling sounds rose up to the heavens. Up in the air, the patriarchs from all 4 divisions began to fight with the nascent soul cultivators from the Sky River Court. Booms rang out. In the initial fighting, it wasn't clear which side had the upper hand among the patriarchs. Although the Sky River Court was outnumbered, the old man who was half a step into the Diva realm actually gave them a bit of an advantage. The Prime Elders, Legacy Echelon cultivators, and Gold Core experts of the river-defying sect formed the backbone of the army. They outnumbered the Sky River Court, and thanks to their constant attacks, the Sky River Court's Gold Core cultivators were suffering one defeat after another. If that were all there were to it, it might not be a big deal. But then, the 3 Heavenspan battleships erupted with blinding light beams of destruction fully 300 meters wide. The power source for the beams of light were the skeletal parts of the Diva realm beast that formed their keels. As the light shot forth, rumbling sounds filled the air, and any Sky River Court cultivator who got in the way was instantly transformed into ash. The target of those destructive beams of light was none other than the dire Skybanyan. For the river-defying sect, there was one key to this battle. The dire Skybanyan. The attacks from the Heavenspan battleships had one purpose: to clear the way for Bai Xiaochun to reach the dire Skybanyan. The 3 beams of light cut through everything like razor-sharp knives slicing through bamboo. When they slammed into the dire Skybanyan, the tree trembled and let out a bitter cry that caused blood to ooze out of the mouths of any cultivators in the vicinity. However, it didn't affect the Blood Ancestor at all. Under Bai Xiaochun's control, the Blood Ancestor leapt high into the air to appear directly in front of the ancient Skybanyan. Then, a giant fist formed and slammed into the tree with the force of 10 mountains. A huge boom echoed out, and the gigantic tree trembled even more violently. Suddenly, enormous waves surged out on the surface of the Heavenspan River as a 30-meter-wide root exploded out. It was over 3,000 meters long and razor-sharp, causing whistling sounds to echo out as it sped toward the Blood Ancestor. Smash! The Blood Ancestor wasn't hurt, but many of the Bloodstream Division cultivators inside coughed up blood from the force of the blow, and had to struggle to prevent their cultivation bases from surging out of control. Bai Xiaochun knew that time was limited, so he quickly unleashed another fist strike. It was a fist strike that could seriously injure even a nascent soul cultivator, but the dire Skybanyan did not fall. And yet, the ancient tree was shocked by the threatening power of the Blood Ancestor, and could tell that only a small portion was being used. If the Blood Ancestor's full battle prowess were unleashed, a single fist strike would be more than enough to cause the dire Skybanyan to explode into countless fragments. Even still, the small portion of power being used was still shocking. Although the tree wasn't confident in being able to harm the giant, it was sure that it could kill the person inside who was controlling it. At the moment, it was willing to pay any price to do just that. As Bai Xiaochun battered it, the tree began to sway back and forth. As for the cultivators of the Sky River Court, it was with complete shock, and fully bloodshot eyes, that they attempted to intervene. It was in that moment of crisis that a second root shot out toward the Blood Ancestor, then a third and a fourth. Whistling screams filled the air, and Bai Xiaochun gritted his teeth. Considering he was in the heart cavity, the brunt of the attacks were being borne by others. Even still, blood was oozing out of Bai Xiaochun's mouth, and on top of that, the power of the attacks was increasing. Moments later, a 5th root appeared, then more, until there were 8. The cultivators inside the Blood Ancestor were having a hard time sustaining such force, and many of them were lapsing into unconsciousness. As a result, Bai Xiaochun's control over the Blood Ancestor was beginning to falter. However, the sustained barrage by the Blood Ancestor had knocked open a gap in the trunk of the dire Skybanyan. I can't keep things up like this, Bai Xiaochun thought, eyes flickering. Roaring at the top of his lungs, he stretched the Blood Ancestor's hands out, shoving them into the gap that had opened, and then exerted all the strength he could muster to rip the opening wider. An ear-piercing ripping sound echoed out, causing numerous Sky River Court cultivators on both banks of the river to let out blood-curdling screams. Even the nascent soul cultivators fighting up in the air were shocked. Bai Xiaochun ripped the gap open to double its previous size, causing the screams of the dire sky banyan to echo high into the heavens. As the huge tree struggled, the waters of the heavenspan river water seethed, and massive waves rolled out as a gigantic root erupted into the air. When the huge root slammed into the blood ancestor, Bai Xiaochun felt like he was about to pass out. Many of the other cultivators inside the blood ancestor coughed up blood. Bai Xiaochun could sense his control over the blood ancestor slipping away. It was in that very moment that two enormous, 30,000-meter-long roots suddenly rose up from within the heavenspan river. They were clearly different from the other roots. They were the main roots of the dire sky banyan. They were like enormous pillars, one on the right, one on the left, smashing toward the blood ancestor. It was a critical moment in which there was no time for pondering or consideration. Bai Xiaochun's eyes were bright red, and he was operating fully on instinct. The blood ancestor's left hand reached out to grab the huge root on the left side. Clamping it under the blood ancestor's left armpit, Bai Xiaochun sent the right hand out to grab the other root and do the same. Rumbling sounds echoed out from the right and left. Bai Xiaochun's face was as white as a sheet of paper as he exercised the last bit of control he was capable of, to bend the blood ancestor's legs. Maybe I can't kill you, but I can lock you down. The blood ancestor gripped the two main roots tightly, then began to sink down into the river. Intense rumbling sounds could be heard as the blood ancestor sank below the surface of the heavenspan river, holding the two roots as he descended toward the river bottom. No matter how the dire sky banyan struggled, it was incapable of preventing this from happening. Roar! The dire sky banyan was going mad, but was helpless. In the blink of an eye, the sinking blood ancestor caused the dire sky banyan to begin to tilt over. Now that it was locked in place, it was difficult for the dire sky banyan to struggle, let alone unleash its most powerful divine abilities. Taking advantage of the moment, Bai Xiaochun opened the blood ancestor's mouth and let out a shocking roar from beneath the surface of the heavenspan river. Instantly, a blast of air carved out a tunnel within the water, within which appeared numerous bloodstream division cultivators. Borrowing the force of the blast of air, they shot out into the open. Gold core cultivators, foundation establishment experts, patriarchs, and even vast numbers of outer and inner sect disciples all burst out into the open. All of them had injuries, but as soon as they bathed in the light cast by the Pillstream Division's cauldron, their wounds began to mend. Clearly, they had been prepared for this moment. As soon as they were out in the open, members of the other three divisions rushed to aid them, and many of them grouped up into the Bloodstream Division's locust-like battle formations. The nascent soul cultivators, including Master Godwind, Patriarch Limitless, and the Song Clan Patriarch, all roared and transformed into beams of light that went to join the nascent soul battles. Although all of them were injured in various ways, as soon as they joined the fighting, the nascent soul battles became like the Gold Core battles, and favored the river-defying sect. As for the Gold Core battles, they became even more one-sided. The last person to fly out of the blood ancestor's mouth was Bai Xiaochun, blood spraying out of his mouth. As soon as he was visible, 8 cultivators from the Spirit Stream Division shot toward him. These 8 were no strangers to Bai Xiaochun. They were the same compatriots with whom he had formed the 9th spell formation of Mount Deoseed. Without the slightest hesitation, they closed in on Bai Xiaochun, and immediately, the light of a spell formation appeared. Form up! Bai Xiaochun roared. Instantly, light rose up around the 9 of them, becoming a 300-meter-tall giant, which leapt into the air. As it sailed upward, its right hand shot out, and a blood-colored greatsword appeared. That sword was formed from the blood chi of the cultivators of Middle Peak. Bai Xiaochun raised the sword high into the air and then slashed it down, whereupon it sliced a nearby sky banyan into 2 parts. Rumble! Everything shook wildly, and all onlookers were completely shaken by the preparation and teamwork shown by the river-defying sect. That was especially true of the audience of cultivator clans and smaller sects. Their minds were completely spinning, and their scalps were tingling with shock. The power and determination shown by the river-defying sect left them completely shaken down to their souls. The battle between the Blood Ancestor and the dire Sky Banyan was something no one would ever be able to forget for their entire lives. Whether it was that fight, or the fighting with the nascent soul cultivators or the Gold Core experts, it was clear that the Sky River Court had the disadvantage. All of the cultivators from the clans and sects were left gasping, their eyes shining with strange light. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.